What is going on, gentlemen? It is time for the long-awaited return of the power rankings. Now, there's been a lot of stuff that has gone on in our league since the last time I did this video. I wanted to take a break a couple of weeks ago just due to all the trades that were going on. Really tough to keep track of what was going on. Now that we're approaching the trade deadline, it's time to come back and really evaluate a lot of the different stuff that has gone on and take a look at where teams are at right now as we are getting ready for the home stretch of the season. With all that being said, you know where we are going to start, ladies and gentlemen. We are going out to the dumpster. It is your dumpster team of the week, and it's coming at you right now. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of the rankings once again. Let's take a look in there. Who is going to be the dumpster team of the week? Well, this has been long overdue, but it is, of course, Gabo McGregor and freshman orientation. Gabo, your team names are now the only interesting thing about your team. Your petty, juvenile little jabs at each of your opponents are now all that you have left to show for the season, as your roster has been decimated by both poor decision-making and bad drafting and injuries. It is just all falling apart. You are now the cakewalk of the league. You handed Boston Monroe a victory that he basically did not deserve. Congratulations. You are now basically the Indianapolis Colts. The only thing crustier than your team is having Jeff Saturday as your head coach. That's all I've got to say for your team. Moving on in the rankings, we've got number 13 coming up right now. Coming in at the number 13 spot in our power rankings, we have, as usual, the path of the righteous man, Pablo, a team that, of course, really fell off this week in particular due to just a massive amount of bye weeks that he was having to deal with. But when you look at this team, he actually has been trending upward recently. He is no longer just the walkover win of the league that he was earlier on in the season when you could basically just pencil yourself in for a victory against him. The resurgence of guys like Amari Cooper, Deebo Samuel, Alvin Kamara, and others have really solidified this team as one to watch going down the stretch. Not a guy that's going to make the playoffs, but a guy that can certainly trip people up. He has gotten multiple wins now in the past couple weeks. Took a big dip this week against JoJo. For once, JoJo didn't get cream pied with a massive amount of points against him, so he was able to pick up a win. But as far as Pablo's team outlook goes, yes, you went old. As you look at this roster, it's just a lot of old players. Sony Michel, you plugged him in this week. You replaced one old running back with another. But overall, this team is not going to be competing for a title, but it certainly is going to be one of the more dangerous teams going down the stretch. And honestly, I'm looking for this team to potentially leapfrog Cam's team in the rankings because, as we're going to get to in a second, I think this team overall may have more potential than Cam's team. But with all that being said, we're going to move on in our rankings to the number 12 spot, and it's coming at you right now. Coming in at number 12, we have Fuzzy Palmer's Cam Lautenschlager. Another week, another pun from Cam. I'm fully expecting him to pick up Cameron Dicker off the waiver wire to satisfy his pun fetish for next week. I'm sure he could just have a field day with Dicker in more ways than one. Now, when you talk about this team, this is the most wildly inconsistent team in our league, in my opinion. Aaron Jones' roller coaster season took another deep dive this week against the Lions, a matchup that you would be thinking that's going to work out great. We're going to have lots of points. Just dropped a 5.5 on you. Brian Robinson Jr., great story, but he has just not been able to find any holes with this lackluster Commanders offense. This team doesn't have great receivers. The tight end position is weak. Geno is honestly the lone bright spot. And when you come in at 3 and 6 with the 12th scoring ranking, well, 12 just looks like the perfect spot for you to be in right now. So, Cam, this is going to be where we find you. I don't know if you went heavy on your gut or if you went heavy on analytics during this drafting process, but whatever you did this year, I strongly recommend doing the opposite next year because this just hasn't worked at all. Nothing you've done has really been successful, and a once proud franchise is now sort of searching to find itself again as your season has basically fallen completely to pieces. With all that being said, Cam, there's still hope for you next year. And I guess you technically have a slight chance to make it, but with this inconsistent roster, I just don't think it's going to happen. With that being said, we are going to move on to the number 11 team in the rankings. It's coming at you right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, coming in at the number 11 spot in the rankings, we have the algorithm himself, Boston Monroe. Now, many of you may be surprised to see Boston down this low, given that he is 7th in the scoring rankings. But he has, most of that has come early in the season. At one point, he was the leading scorer in our league, actually, if you can believe that. With Boston Monroe, when I look at this team, it's Josh Allen, it's Christian McCaffrey, and then it's just bits and pieces, it's scraps from all over the league. You have Justice Hill, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and James Robinson as kind of this rotational piece. None of those guys are solid. They're all committee guys, backup guys, just guys that you cannot rely on. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire honeymoon phase that was happening early in the season that was kind of carrying you, that has faded off, and it's just led to a lot of bad results for your team. Now, you look at yourself and you're 5-4, but you basically got handed a free win this week. I just don't know what's going on. I think what you probably should have done was maybe honestly traded Josh Allen for some pieces and then just gone with Justin Fields down the stretch. That was something that maybe a more savvy fantasy owner would have done, but the algorithm apparently doesn't like to make in-season trades. You haven't really done much in that department. Your 2 tight end look that you went with this week yielded you a grand total of 1 point between Higbee and Taysom Hill. I'm just not seeing where the consistent point scoring is going to be coming from other than from your top 2 guys. You may have some weeks where you go off, but I don't see this team as one of those teams that's going to really make a run and get into the playoffs. I kind of bumped you down. I like some of these other teams' potential a lot more. So I had to bump you down, Boston. I'm sorry about that. I know you're 5-4, but for all the reasons I just explained, I don't believe that this team can continue to sustain success. With that being said, we're going to move into the top 10. It's going to be coming at you right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, coming in at the number 10 spot, we have I Want Gabe Davis, AJ, Mr. New Era himself. He may have New Era'd himself right out of a potential late season playoff run with his trade with Sean that is now really has Sean Bates looking like a potential wild card candidate, sort of the James K. Polk, if you will, of the late season playoff run here. Ajit, happy Election Day, guys, by the way. Didn't even mention that. It's being filmed on Election Day. When we're talking about Ajit here, you did New Era yourself out of a potential great team, but with the addition of Cordero Patterson, I bumped you up a couple of spots higher than maybe you normally would. I put you ahead of Boston's team because just when I look at your roster, I just see more scoring potential from your roster than from Boston. Because besides David Montgomery and Marcus Mariota, every other guy on your team is kind of viable. I mean, you look at Gabe Davis. Now, Gabe Davis is the type of guy that is sort of the Mike Williams of the East Coast, Barry boom or bust. But if you get Gabe Davis to boom a couple of times down the stretch, you can really mess up somebody's playoff chances. I know I'm playing you late in the season. I was feeling confident about that a couple weeks ago, but the way this roster is shaking out with Cordero Patterson coming back, this roster actually has a chance to potentially move up into the top 10 if you can start stringing wins together, and I wouldn't be surprised. Now, Mariota is going to hold you back because without some sort of rushing element to his game, he basically can't do anything. I know that as much as anybody, being a Kyle Pitts victim this year. So with your team, Ajit, I really think that there's some hope here. Hawkinson's trade may really help you going to the Vikings, where that passing offense is certainly going to be good, and they like to use that tight end a lot. So with your team, I put you at number 10, kind of based on past performance. You're 11th in the league in scoring right now, but I think you can kind of up that as the season goes along. You're going to probably have some dud weeks because your team is kind of inconsistent, but you're going to boom sometimes. This week you had a good week. It just didn't quite work out for you. Lester just got a little bit there, a little bit ahead of you there. So with that being said, we're going to move into the side of the top 10. We're going to go to number 9 right now. All right, gentlemen, moving on to the number 9 spot in our league. We have tight end university, Chris Hasenheier. Chris, you got the number 1 pick in the draft. Everything was looking good. You click Jonathan Taylor and you just think, see you in the playoffs, right? You know, you've got the number 1 guy. You've got everybody's golden boy. This is really the pitfall of that number 1 pick. I never loved having that number 1 pick. Your team without Jonathan Taylor has really just kind of disintegrated over the last couple of weeks. You're 10th in the league in points scored. Your cupcake schedule that was happening early on in the year that has sort of faded off. You put up a decent week this week, okay? Mostly because of a ridiculous touchdown by Curtis Samuel that never should have happened. And your trade for Jalen Hurts is actually looking decent. He's given you a lot of viability at the quarterback spot. But you look at this team, there's just question marks everywhere with this team. I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Ajit kind of surpassed you in the rankings, because when I look at Ajit's running backs, I just talked about how much I like them. With you, it's the exact opposite. Michael Carter, yes, he has a good week this week, but how much volume is going to be there for him on a week-to-week basis with James Robinson? Who knows? Deion Jackson and Jonathan Taylor, either one of them, this Colts offense is now a completely toxic cesspool where you can't really rely on any of those guys. Not loving that. Curtis Samuel, other than the long touchdown he caught, didn't do anything. Unfortunately for you, Chris, a referee is not going to run into the safety on a deep ball every single week. Therefore, Curtis Samuel's effectiveness very questionable. Tyler Lockett, the one good piece from what was otherwise just a dismal trade between you and Gabo involving Keenan Allen and Darren Waller, 2 of the most ridiculously fragile players of the season. But Lockett is kind of your one bright spot, but then it just all goes downhill. You had to play Alec Pierce at flex. Nothing in this Colts offense is good. You're heavy on the Colts and Broncos offenses. I mean, I can't think of 2 offenses that I'd want to be more out on than those 2, and yet you're just covered with those type of guys. Chris, it was fun for a while when you were getting those easy wins. I think that the tough part of your schedule is now coming up, and I think you're going to kind of get separated down into this bottom tier. It was fun while it lasted, but I can't rank you any higher. All right, moving on in the rankings, we are going to go to the number 8 team. It's coming at you right now. All right, gentlemen, moving on to the number 8 spot. Fittingly, we have Super 8 JoJo Cunningham. Now this team, I really want to put them higher, honestly. If we're looking at this like the college football playoff, I look at this team, and I think, I compare them to someone like Utah, okay? They've got a couple of losses, yes, but the roster is strong. They have some impressive wins and a lot of talent. And when you have Patrick Mahomes putting up basically Texas Tech numbers last night, he gets there to another solid week. It's just been a lot of solid weeks. And with JoJo, a 3-game win streak, if he beats Sean Bates in a huge upset next week, he is back to 500 and right in the playoff race in this league. Make no mistake about it, he'd be right there. Mahomes, 35.1. You've got pieces I like everywhere. You've got Travis Kelce. A.J. Brown's still good. Tony Pollard's going to be coming back for the stretch run. You're a little weak at your running back depth, but honestly, Tyler Boyd is another guy you look at and go, with Chase out, could he be more of a wide receiver 2 versus a flex to kind of cancel that out? We will see. JoJo, I was high on your roster coming into the year. I think I had you 4th in the initial power rankings. You are 4th in points scored on the season as far as your scoring rank. I really do like it. You've kind of proven how if you do get that number 1 quarterback option, it can go a long way to fixing some of your other flaws. And when you add in the fact that Justin Tucker is great, Kelce and Mahomes, when they had those big weeks, you're almost unstoppable. 3-game winning streak, you beat me, you beat Nibs, and last week you put Pablo in the ground. Your team is kind of rolling right now. That's another one that I can look at and say, hey, it's going to be kind of rolling towards a potential late round playoff berth. With that being said, we are going to move on. It is near the top half of the league. We're going to the number 7 team. right now. All right, folks, moving on. It's the number 7 team in the league, just on the outside of my projected sort of playoff standings. It is Next Year FC, Leicester. Now, I just compared JoJo's team to sort of like a Utah, a team with a couple losses, but looks good. If I was to compare Leicester to somebody, I would sort of compare him to like a Clemson, a team that has played basically a cupcake schedule, got a very lucky win a couple of weeks ago where you basically scored 80 points and won. That's barely ever happens. You've got a nice record, but when you look at the scoring standings, you are 9th in the league in points scored. That is well into the bottom half of the league. You've kind of just fattened up on some of these games, but you've taken some weeks off. Your team has had a lot of seesaws. When I look at this roster, right, Devontae Adams, Jalen Waddle, clearly a great receiving tandem. But there's question marks in a lot of other spots. Your quarterback situation, Heineke versus Dak Prescott. You're going to have to fiddle around with that. Heineke's certainly not reliable. Leonard Fournette is not even close to being an RB1. When you look at Fournette, his running back position ranking now, technically he's top 10, but with a team that hasn't had their bye yet, he's basically a fringe RB1. And I just don't like his outlook, really. He does catch a lot of passes, which is decent, but not sold on Fournette. And another thing, your tight end spot with Likely is not looking good either. So a lot of sort of question marks with this team, very up and down and inconsistent. I just don't have it in that upper tier of teams to where I'd put you up in that spot. So with that being said, we're going to move on into the tier of teams that I think will be in the playoffs. And we're going to start off with number 6 right now. All right, folks, moving into the number 6 spot, we have Let's Ride, Brandon Niblock. So I don't know if you may need to change your team name because I know you don't have Wilson anymore, but you're at the number 6 spot, just on the fringe of the playoffs. You're 6th in the league in scoring ranking as well, so it kind of makes sense. Obviously, the big news coming out of this week was the trade that we made, giving you T. Higgins, Justin Herbert, and Jamal Williams for Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson. A lot of people talking, a lot of people kind of down on this trade on your end. I am not one of those people. I did not want to give up those pieces to you. People know how much I love T. Higgins. I've been a huge believer in him. I've had him on my team at least once every single year that he's been in the league in fantasy. Jamal Williams is a top-tier running back. Whether you want to admit it or not, he's a running back 13 right now. I don't see how people are fucking with that. He's a league leader in touchdowns. Didn't score a touchdown and still put up double-digit points. He's not even completely touchdown dependent either. He can still score even without touchdowns. It didn't work out for you this week. Deontay Foreman not in the right game script. You had Swift coming back off injury, not really getting used. You may need to replace him. You had a couple bye weeks on your team. You're going to be able to play around with your receiver and flex spots. I trust you to guide your team into the playoffs, given that you have sort of an easier schedule down the stretch. You still get to play Gabo. That's a huge plus for anybody that has not played Gabo yet and is in this playoff race. Huge plus to be able to play him down the stretch. You're going to get to do that and a couple other teams that I'm not sold on, which we'll get to in a second. And then with that being the case, we sort of have you in this space where you've solidified your quarterback spot as well, so that's not going to be as much of an issue when you don't have to play Sam Ehlinger anymore. I like this team, T. Higgins, and Brandon Ayuk as receivers. I believe in that group tremendously. I believe in Jamal Williams, and I think Herbert's going to get going with these new receivers. As he gets healthier, he can still wing it around. You can see it. I think it's all going to click together for you to have a strong stretch run. With that being said, we're going to now move into the top 5 teams that I really believe in to be in the playoffs this year, and it's going to start out with the number 5 team right here. All right, gentlemen of the league, we are now moving on into the top 5. This is probably going to be a controversial ranking. I don't feel great about this ranking, but I respect kind of the record and I respect the standings, but at the same time, this is probably the team that's in danger of really slipping down the most, and that is Nate Solly. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson, Now, Nate, I'm putting you in the top 5 this week ahead of our matchup. But if I'm just going to let you know that if I beat you this week, and it's looking like I will because you've got Lamar and Kenyon Drake both on bye weeks this week, 2 of your key starters, I don't have anyone on bye. I think I'm going to win, and your team could be falling, and I'm going to leapfrog you in the standings. I'm not even sure you're going to be in a playoff spot come next week. And it's come so far. Early in the year, I believed in your team. I think some of the trades you've made, particularly the acquisition of Najee Harris, have arguably hurt your team, okay? I don't know what prompted you to sort of go in on Najee Harris. That was one of the trades that kind of surprised me, Nate, because I think you're a smart guy, but I want to know what you saw from Najee Harris over the course of the season that made you think, let's go get this guy. Because he has done nothing in my eyes that is really deserving of giving up anything for him. And even though it doesn't seem like you gave up a lot for him, Tyler Boyd can become an interesting piece down the stretch. A.J. Dillon, if the Packers would ever use him, could become an interesting piece down the stretch. Dillon hasn't performed well, but Boyd, I think, is a guy you could be using right now, especially when you look at your receiving core, right? You're relying right now on Drake London and Devontae Smith, 2 really inconsistent guys. Drake London, he should arguably not even be rostered. The guy is basically a waiver wire wide receiver at this point. You started him at flex. You don't really have any obvious options to replace him in your lineup. You're kind of just going to have to roll with him. I don't like the look of this at all. But what I do like, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, that's kind of like a Boston Monroe dynamic with Josh Allen and Christian McCaffrey. If those 2 guys have big games and you get something from Mike Evans and maybe you get a big week from your kicker or something, you might be able to scrape together some wins. But you have played a very easy schedule, and that's kind of what's led to this great record that you have. But hey, I'm coming. I'm ready. My team's fully loaded. We're going to talk about that in just a sec. Spoiler alert, number 4 is coming at you right now. Okay, folks. Moving on. Number 4 in our fantasy league, it is the Best Team Revenge Tour. Myself, Justin Carney. I'm 5th in the league in scoring rankings, so I feel pretty comfortable putting myself in this. We come off a big win this week. My team has been doing pretty well recently. Haven't been below 90 since week 2, so we've just come out here every single week, got it done. And I got to be honest with you guys, I woke up this morning and got to look at my lineup with Nick Chubb in it for the first time. I'm feeling really good. And there's one real reason I was able to make this trade. The biggest reason that I was able to do this is the emergence of Juju Smith-Schuster as a legit plug-it-in-and-forget-him flex. Juju Smith-Schuster, the last 3 times he's been out on the field, at least 13.8 points. He's gone off a couple of times, getting targeted more and more. The Chiefs' offense has unlocked its next gear with Juju Smith-Schuster now. Mahomes clearly and him are now on the same page. It's not just the Kelsey show anymore. There's plenty of room in that receiving game for 2 guys. Juju has become that second guy, and it's been great. Olave, so consistent. Andy Dalton sucks. Doesn't matter. He's still scoring. Jefferson had one of his big weeks. That's the key. He has to keep having some big weeks for me to have success. And listen, my team, nobody's really been talking about it. Not getting mentioned a lot in terms of teams that are good. I even had somebody say my roster was like bad. What the hell is that? What the hell are you talking about? I basically traded 3 guys out of my starting lineup for nothing because Chubb was not there, and I still put up 108 points. So I'm very happy with my roster. I think it's good. I never have to play Darrell Henderson Jr. again. Thank the fucking Lord that I don't have to sit through his performances anymore. Just really excited. God forbid if Kyle Pitts starts to get going here down the stretch, that guy could turn my season around. I'm still holding out hope that he may have a couple more good weeks in him. With that being said, that's going to wrap it up for my team. The Revenge Tour rolls on, but we've got another team to go to. It's our top 3 time. We are going now to the number 3 team right now. Top 3 time, folks. Here we go. At number 3, Bad Luck Bates strikes again. Sean, I kind of want to have you higher, but right now there are 3 teams I think that people are really talking about as the clear front runners. This, to me, is one of them. With your team, obviously you went heavy on Cardinals. That wasn't working early in the year. It's working now. DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray, they have helped each other out to where they are now viable guys. Even against the Seahawks defense that has been performing pretty well, you're still able to get production from both of those guys. And then when you look at Eckler and Etienne, is there a better tandem? I would argue there's only one other team that can boast a tandem that is this consistent and this good in our league, and we'll talk about that team here in just a second. The only concern for you, well, actually, there's two now that I'm looking at it. You've got weak tight end, and you've got Michael Pittman Jr., who is kind of an albatross now on your team. Dobbs getting injured is not great, but I think with Jamar Chase coming back, you've just got to toe the line a little bit until Chase gets back for that stretch run. If you can just get into the playoffs, and it looks like you're going to have the point scored tiebreaker, by the time Chase comes back, you're going to be looking pretty good. I would argue that even though you have weaknesses at tight end and wide receiver too, you still have enough at running back and quarterback to kind of get you over the hump. So I'm still sold on the quality of your team. You're second in the league in points. You're one of only two teams now that's hit the 1,000-point barrier so far. So we'll look to see if you can keep that going. With that being said, Mr. Bates, I couldn't quite put you in that top two because we've just got two teams in this league right now that are really cooking with gas. We're moving on to the number two team, and it's coming at you right now. All right, folks, moving on to the number two team in the league. We have 8-Ball, Brennan Costello. Now, I personally would love to put you up at number one. Believe me, I would. I absolutely would. But it's been a long-standing precedent with these rankings that the number one team will continue to be number one until they lose. And right now we've got a Jake Smith team on a 5-game winning streak, and I just can't take him off as long as he's winning. But if I had to look at things, your team is number one in scoring, and I think you have the deepest team in our league right now. Position by position, you look at this team. The only weakness, and I'm talking a slight weakness, is Tom Brady at quarterback. Everything else, Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs, very solid running back tandem. Stephon Diggs and DK Metcalf, very, very good. Dallas Goedert, one of the best tight ends in fantasy this year. Your flex, you can go with Garrett Wilson or Lazard. Doesn't matter. Both of those guys are producing. And even your kicker and defense are really good. This team is so deep that it's going to be very tough. Your team has a high floor, the highest floor in the league. I looked it up. Your team basically, I think your worst week was like 93 or 94 points. Just so consistent week to week, Brennan, and that's why you're the number one scoring team in this league. You've just been really good, and this week you just took it to another level with Joe Mixon. Obviously, that's not going to happen every week, but you went to the 159.4 range. That's the highest total we've had in our league this season. Just outstanding. Nothing bad to say about it. I was critical of some of these picks. The two picks that I was most critical of, I believe, were Josh Jacobs and DK Metcalf. Those guys have both been outstanding. So I was wrong on that one, Brennan. You should have been higher in my preseason power rankings. But hey, what can I do? With that being said, we are going to move on to the unquestioned, the undisputed number one champion of our league. Right now, it's coming at you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have at the number one spot in our power rankings, it is, of course, the molesters, Jake Smith. Jake, I was high on your team. I think I had them third in the preseason rankings, and you really delivered after some early season question marks. Had a little bit of trouble with that flex spot early on in the year. You seem to have solved that. Terry McLaurin has started to come around with Heineke as the quarterback. And with Godwin healthy, you kind of rounded out your roster a lot. But when you talk about great duos in fantasy football, Saquon Barkley and Kenneth Walker III right now, is there any duo better? You could argue no. I was talking about Sean's team with Etienne and Eckler. I mentioned there's only one team that can sort of compete with that. That would be you with this duo. Raheem Mostert is kind of a playable flex now. His stock has started to fall a little bit with the addition of my guy, Jeff Wilson Jr., but your quarterback is solid with Tua and Joe Burrow. That's great 1-2 punch as well. Cooper Kupp, nobody catches a 5-yard out. quite like Cooper Kupp. The guy is the total package in the Rams offense. That's all they really bring to the table. I really like this team overall. I think it's the best. It has the most explosive talent. And I think you're going to continue to rise in the scoring rankings. Really, the top 3 teams have the best shot. I would say between all the teams in the league, I would say the top 3 teams probably have around a 60 to 65% shot. And then the rest of us are just kind of looking for that one thing to get us over the hump to maybe compete with you guys. But the top 3, you guys should all be very proud of the seasons you've had. Excellent work in the draft. And then as the season's gone along, making these guys and turning your teams into elite units. With that being said, that's basically going to wrap up the rankings. Jay, congratulations once again. You're number 1 this week. You've been, basically, if we'd been doing this, you'd just could have been number 1 probably the last 4 or 5 weeks. As soon as you lose, if Brennan wins, though, he'll probably take over at number 1. He's a guy that really deserves it as well. Deserves a lot of credit. That's going to wrap it up. Happy Election Day, everyone. Hope you got out and voted. People should probably be doing that. I think voting is a lot of fun. Get out there. Hey, a lot of people don't get to do it, so take advantage of the opportunity while you can. I hope you guys are all doing well. Best of luck to all of you next week, except for Nate. I hope everybody on your team fucks up. Peace out, folks.